A long time ago, on a comics page far, far away.
Welcome to Panel Up, your monthly pop culture panel. I'm John Campbell.
And I am Mike Gergoni.
Gergoni, we're back again for another month. It's the beginning of 2025. It's our first, not our first episode, but stuff we may have recorded in 2024. Podcast time travel.
Podcast time travel being what it is, this is our first episode recorded Panel Up-wise in 2025. And oh, what a year it's being.
I did see somebody use the 30 Rock quote, but they changed it to, geez, what a year. Lemon, it's January. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard the term, we're staring down the barrel of 2025 right now.
Yeah, that feels fair. Although it does feel like every year takes the brunt of it, right? Doesn't it feel like every year they're like, enough with this year already? It's like, You know when that started, John? That started in March of 2020, and it hasn't stopped. It is. I just think it's so interesting where it's like, maybe just accept that it's going to be a base level bad for, a while.
This is why we shelter in the warm glow of the television.
We sure do. Yeah, we've got sort of 1.5 reviews this week because we're talking about the new Star Wars show, of course, very on brand for us. But we wanted to make sure we didn't forget something else. I think that seemingly, like, very quietly super important, because we got what is being dubbed the first official DCU project.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings about the vaunted nature of that. Like, obviously, it is technically the first DC project under the umbrella of the new reorganized, like, all bow to James Gunn, new DC czar over at our distinguished competition. And this is the first project that is rolling out under that regime.
Yes, that is. Well, it's a weird thing because retroactively a couple other things are part of it.
Right. That's why it feels weird to me.
Yeah. Well, and even this wasn't like designed to be the first thing. It's just this was the first thing that was done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
like it's sort of a thing where it's like, this was a thing that was already being made, and they're like, well, that'll be part of the new continuity, and technically it's coming out first. So it's like this whole thing is just this weird, like, nobody expected this to be how this kicked off.
Right. Like, kind of also the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker are technically first out of the gate here. If you talk about, like, what's considered quote unquote canon, and again, that word is almost useless to us over at DC at this point.
I think Gunn said it perfectly when I saw someone ask him what's canon, and he said, whatever we reference.
Yeah.
If we reference it in a thing, then it's canon. And that's sort of the way we're looking at it. If it's like, oh, this character knows about a thing that happened in another movie, now that's canon.
Right. Like, could the events of Black Adam have happened in this canon? Absolutely, 100%. Sure.
Well, not? I mean, as Gunn said, technically that means all of Peacemaker Season 1 is canon except for that scene the Justice League's in.
Sure.
No, it's very strange. Blue Beetle is also canon, by the way.
Great. Cool. I like that movie.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that is that because that actor is coming back, and they're doing an animated show continuing from that movie as well.
Great, cool, can't wait.
Yeah. So anyway, Creature Commandos, though, I will say, and friend of the show Brendan Jones has been saying this over on his other podcast, Prodigious Saps, and is very true. Is boy, this being like, check it out, guys, it's the beginning of the new DCU, and boy, you can feel everyone who's worried about it being too gunny get like, it's everything we feared.
We got 7 episodes of Creature Commandos, and boy, does this feel just like they drew it out of James Gunn's veins.
Yeah. I don't think this is indicative of what everything will feel like. And no, Brendan's not saying that, but it is sort of a thing where it's like, watch what I said! I told you this would happen!
Yeah. I just want to rip this Band-Aid off right now.
Yeah.
I think this show is good. I did not enjoy watching it.
I loved it.
I
with all
thought
my
you would.
heart.
Yeah.
It's so weird and bloody and dark and full of monsters.
And over
God.
the last 4 years, like you say, it's just been getting darker and darker. And so it's not what I'm looking for in my media most of the time.
We're different
And
people.
I know you live in a blighted neo-noir, and I'm attempting to escape into high fantasy.
But this isn't black. This isn't. I mean, in the fashion of a lot of gun stuff. If you dug the Guns, the Suicide Squad, you'll definitely dig this show because it's not. It's an interesting thing. There's a lot of dark stuff that happens, but of course, the aesthetics of the show are so poppy and crazy, and
Sure. Yeah. The thing that I'm reminded of most, if I'm going to compare it to another of Gunn's projects, would be Super, personally.
Well, yeah.
I think it has, like, tonally a lot of very similar vibes. And that is definitely one of his movies that I have gone back to the least, because, again, it's, like, dark and bleak, and, like, while it does have this kind of, like, pop kind of zany vibe to it, it also, like, is at the end of the day kind of a bummer.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, and I think Suicide Squad is also that, because these are definitely much darker than Guardians, even if they're clearly made by the same person.
Yeah, for sure. But in the same way that, like, Slither and Super are made by the same person, clearly.
Yeah.
And while they both have, like, gross out moments and over the top kind of zany attitudes that is a trademark of Gunn's, one is a bit more of a bleak look at the world than the other.
Yeah, it's interesting that you got bleak from this.
I mean, okay, spoiler, can we talk about what happens in the show? So if you're going to watch Creature Commandos, go watch Creature Commandos. I think it's a good show. I think it's well put together. I think everyone there... I'm a huge fan of Indra Varma, who voices the brides in the show. But...
I mean, actually, everybody, it's an insane voice cast.
Yeah.
And, of course, Gunn, whether you enjoy his aesthetics or tone, Gunn is a very good writer.
Yeah.
That's always sort of a thing I push back, not on you, but just on general, when people go like, it's like you don't have to dig his thing, but, like, the guy knows what he's doing.
Again, I'm not debating the quality of the show. I think it's very well put together. I think all the flashback stuff is super impactful. It's just not what I'm personally looking for if I'm looking for escapist media, right?
Right.
I want to draw that distinction. Like, I'm Mike Gargoni, watched this show and went like, man, I don't enjoy being in the headspace this show puts me in, because it's a rough ride. And, like, there's bits of it where it's like child death, and, like, our main, like, innocent character who has a pure heart dies in this show, and, like, all the stuff with G.I. Robot is, like, fun because he's killing Nazis, but also kind of a bummer because he's running into the existential, like, problems of, if you define your whole personality on hating a certain outgroup, like, you're not a person.
Yeah.
And, like, it's all very well put together, and, like, all the Dr. Phosphorus stuff is very good. And, I mean, Alan Tudyk, obviously, you and I are both huge fans of, and he's great in this show.
I mean, so is James Gunn, and rightfully so. And that guy's all over the DCU. If there's one thing that we know the DCU is giving us, it's lots of Alan Tudyk. Yeah.
I mean, he plays Clayface again in this show, and he plays Clayface over on Harley Quinn.
Yeah. He's not. They've already confirmed he's not going to play Clayface in the Clayface movie.
Damn it!
No, well, because he's playing a different character in live action, which he also voices in this. And excuse my comic book brain for not remembering the name of the scientist who built the Metal Men, William Magnus.
Oh,
who he does voice in this briefly. He's going to be playing that character in live action.
That character in the show did look very Alan Tudyk-y.
Yeah.
Okay.
The rumblings are he's going to make a cameo appearance in Superman and then be a part of the, So yeah. So don't worry though. There's still plenty of Alan Tudyk to go around.
All of that being said, For
Yeah.
me personally,
Yeah.
this show was just like, I recognize it's good, but it's not what I'm looking for personally as I'm consuming media, as opposed to the other thing we're talking about today, which is pure joy.
Sure. No, yeah, like I said, it's it also, one of the things I like about this that I think, once again, some people might be like, oh God, he's gunning it up. But it certainly indicates that there's going to be a wide, and something Gunn has talked about, there's going to be a wide range of tones in the DC universe. And this certainly states that this is very, very much earns its TVMA rating. But as we point out, not just in, of course, there's extreme gore in it. But like almost
cartoonish levels of like, think like, oh, I don't know, Metalocalypse levels of just like insane brutal gore.
Right. But almost to an absurd degree though.
Yes,
right? Like almost to the point where it's like, it's
cartoonish. Literally.
Yeah. But in themes as well, as we're talking about. Yeah. I loved everything with the Frankensteins. Of course, that was my favorite stuff. The idea of the Frankenstein monster being a toxic ex-boyfriend / stalker is such an amazing take.
Is he dead at the end of this show?
I don't think so.
I mean, we do see a body. It looks like he's dead and bleeding to death on the ground.
But he's also always dead.
Yeah, that's true. And if it was
sort of what I took it as.
If bullets were all it took to kill him, I feel like that would have already happened.
If somebody zaps some juice into him, he'll be back up and at it. I think that's sort of that's kind of the thing, right? And I also get the sense he's been killed before, right? Like I think and also, I mean, that's something that they've been very clear about, that Harbor, the idea of Harbor playing that in live action has definitely come up.
Sure. I mostly found the like metatextualness of him playing Frankenstein due to that Netflix special that came out a couple of years back.
Which did anybody watch that except us? If they didn't, they should. It's one of the funniest, weirdest.
What is it? David Harbour presents Frankenstein's monster Frankenstein.
Yeah,
that is a monster.
Frankenstein's monster Frankenstein, I think is the something like that. I'll look it up, but it's the closest thing I've seen from America that reminds me of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Yeah, 100%. Very similar vibes. It's about David Harbour analyzing his grandfather's work in a production of Frankenstein.
Frankenstein's Monster Frankenstein is the title. And the whole idea is it's this whole fake idea that David Harbour comes from this lineage of great actors, and he's trying to understand his father through a live TV production of Frankenstein. It's one of the weirdest goddamn things anyone's made, and it totally should indicate how successful Stranger Things is, that he was able to get Netflix to fund that based off of just like, hey, will you make my weird Frankenstein thing? Anyway, it is very funny that he plays the Frankenstein monster here, and plays him as this guy who is, once again, a toxic stalker boyfriend, but from his perspective, it's just like, well, yeah, of course, she loves me.
Our unrequited love spans the eons. There's no one else for me.
In his, there's no nefariousness to the way Harbour plays it, but he's the scariest dude.
Yeah,
but he's but he's just sort of like innocently. When the scene where, and we're of course, but the scene where Rick Flag is dying, as far as he's concerned, dying, and he's just like, hey, just hold on. Does she ever talk about me?
Yeah.
And obviously that the Rick Flag Sr. is probably the biggest. I mean, Gunn. It seems pretty clear that that's going to be the Nick Fury of his DCU, because so far,
Grillo Sr. or
Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr. Because we know for a fact he's in Superman and he's going to be in season 2 of Peacemaker. So far, Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr. seems to be the thread of all of these things.
And look, I'm not mad about that. More Grillo is never
more Grillo in anything. Yeah. As he continues to say, he's like, "Hey man, Marvel got me out of there. Time to go to DC. Got more work to do."
If he can be a B action movie star in a AAA superhero movie, God bless him.
Oh, we I mean, look, from back my days doing the Action Shelf, we love Grillo over there. So anyway,
He's never made any bones about where he fits in the cinematic landscape, and it's always like he's a B action star who sometimes shows up as a supporting role.
Goes wherever, and he's totally a guy that Gunn would seize upon.
Totally.
So yeah, no, so yeah, I mean, I do think the strangest thing about this, and I think the muted reaction from a mainstream audience makes sense. This is a very strange thing to be witness the birth of a new continuity. You know, like some of the ads over that were like, no, maybe back off a little bit more. It has been picked up for a second season, so obviously it was successful on some level for them.
I think it fits pretty squarely into the same sort of audiences that like Harley Quinn and the Kite Man show are getting, right? Of just like gonzo DC overly laden with weird continuity animated stuff. Like that has an audience.
It does. I think what's going to be interesting with this one as opposed to those is more going forward with this idea of Gunn wanting a universe, right? So everything that's in this is in continuity with all the live action stuff. The idea that going forward, whether it's a animated show or a live action movie or even a video game, will all be telling the same story.
Well,
it's going to be really, or at least they'll all be stories that have happened in the same world.
Sure, yeah, and I think we've talked about this in previous episodes. That's a healthier approach. You don't need to be telling one cohesive story. You just need to be telling stories in a world that feels cohesive.
It's something people don't seem to understand, though, because the amount of people that I've seen be like on Gunn's ass about like, I don't understand. Why are you making a Clayface movie before you're making a Wonder Woman movie if you're trying to get to Justice League? And he's like, we're not trying to get to Justice League. There is no saga, there is no goal. We're not building to them fighting Darkseid. These are all individual stories that exist in the same universe.
Yeah, so I'll be curious to see how the show evolves going forward.
Like I said, it's weird for it to be, and I put that more on the Warner Brothers, and I get it, but the whole idea about like, yeah, the idea of trying to like parse out what is this. Okay, if this is step one of the DC universe, what is the DC universe? Maybe don't have that mindset because you're going to maybe end up being upset.
Honestly, I stopped having that mindset after Justice League 1. Like, at this point, like where DC stuff is concerned, I take each project as a singular thing, and if it happens to reference other bits of DC canon, great, cool. I'm well versed enough in the comic book stuff that none of it really loses me.
Can we bring up the thing that people are, of course, freaking out about, which is this is the first appearance of DCU Batman for one brief second, and the amount that I've seen speculation built on a single silhouette,
which is just the classic Batman silhouette in a roof.
Holy shit! Yeah. It's Alan Ritchson. I've seen people go like, "Oh my god, it's Reacher. He is playing Batman, confirmed," because that's definitely a drawing of him. You know, like, oh my god. Or people going like, holy shit, he's bringing Affleck back. I know it. That's the Affleck costume. It's like, yeah, the amount of speculation from that one thing. And something Gunn talked about, I think he said that was the most he asked for redesigns of. Because he was just like, make it shadowier. Make it, I don't want to have to commit to anything. So he purposely made it as vague as possible.
Yeah. It might as well be the like outline that we got in the original animated series before the lightning flash.
Yeah. The big thing that Gunn said, the only thing that you should take from that is there is a Batman. He already exists, much like there's a Superman who already exists. We want to come into a world that already has a lot of these characters. But
Batman was the one who apprehended Dr. Phosphorus. That's all we know.
Which is rad. And that's all I took it as. I'm like, that's so cool that we just live in a world where, you know, it's actually something that I thought they were doing that before in Ayer's Suicide Squad when you have the flashback to Captain Boomerang being captured by the Flash. And I'm like, that's cool. And so I'm glad they're doing more stuff like that. We're just like, oh, just this idea about these rivalries. It's this thing I like in Reeves' Batman movie as well. It's like, oh, Batman already fought and captured the Joker. This has already happened. Yeah. These relationships are just exist. And so I think if they want to do more stuff like that, do it. I love that idea.
Sure, yeah. And this idea that, like, Batman has put away bad guys and they're in a prison somewhere. Like, people can accept that. We don't need to have seen it on screen.
No, and that's a big thing he talks about is we don't need any more of these origin stories. No one needs to see Batman or Superman's origin story anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like I said, I really enjoyed it.
With all that said, we first step out of the gate, we need to leap to Nightfall.
Well, I mean, look, I already know. Once again, the aforementioned friend of the show, Brendan Jones, is very upset that they're leaping to Damian.
Yeah, I know, but with the implication being that we've had several Robins before this, so we can get right to Nightwing and Red Hood and Red Robin and characters whose we can settle into having evolved to that already.
I like that idea. Other people may not like that idea. You know, to each their own. Anyway. Sure. Let's go over. So that's what's happening over at DC. Obviously, I think we'll have a lot more to say in the summer when we get Superman, which is really, I think, going to be the first. And just even the way it's presented, it's a gigantic, huge tentpole summer action blockbuster. That's going to really be the first giant mainstream rollout.
Yeah,
of this
100%. Yeah. Super fantastic summer. Can't wait.
Yep. We'll be doing that. I think. Yeah. I looked at that. I think Superman will be our July episode, and Fantastic Four comes out right at the end of July will be our August episode, actually.
Makes sense, yeah.
So we'll do those back to back. All right. Let's move over to a galaxy far, far away and talk about Space Goonies.
Space Goonies, Skeleton Crew. All right. We've got ourselves our first new Star Wars show since Ahsoka. It's also strange that how many years has it been now since our last Star Wars movie?
Oh, it's well, now we're going into our 6th year. It was December of 2019 was Rise of Skywalker. So
we have now kind of settled into this rhythm of Star Wars shows, but this is maybe the first one since the first season of The Mandalorian that has sort of disconnected itself from the larger goings on. I guess The Acolyte did that as well, but The Acolyte was sort of a half step just because, like, I don't know. Well, when you're dealing with Jedi stuff, there's this inevitability
it was also very consciously moving way back in time into the High Republic, right?
Sure. But the immediacy of the, all of these guys are doomed kind of aspect of any story you tell with a Jedi before the rise of the Empire sort of lends this, like, air of tragedy to almost any of those stories, and The Acolyte kind of leaned into that.
Yeah.
This one feels way more disconnected in a way that I don't think anything since that first season of The Mandalorian has felt.
Yeah.
I think that is to its benefit. I mean, cards on the table right off the bat. I loved Skeleton Crew.
Great. Yeah. It's for the exact reason you're talking about, that I think when I finished it, I think I was pleasantly surprised by, like Luke Skywalker didn't show up at the end of it.
We didn't have almost any gratuitous cameos besides one that was just for us.
Oh, well, yeah, that no one in the world, unless you watch this show or remember comics from the 1970s, would even perceive as a cameo.
Yes. Just the mere mention of the name Crimson Jack.
It's not even a cameo, or a reference.
Yeah, but the fact that reference was even made me do a spit take.
It really does speak to, I think, how this show was created, right? Which is by John Watts and Christopher Ford, who were the creators of this. I think just this so stemmed from them being kids who grew up so steeped in Star Wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure that's like a thing where it's like Crimson Jack is stuck in our heads because we read those comics as kids for them, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like, that's they didn't even know they were doing it for us. They were just doing it for themselves, going, remember when we read those comics, you know?
Yeah. Something we always, not always, but something we often talk about when we're doing our normal coverage of the Marvel Star Wars comics is this idea that we can't really proceed, right? Like these comics are trapped in continuity in a way because they can't push things beyond movies that haven't happened yet. They don't want to tamper with any sort of continuity that might be immediately destroyed by a movie that's coming out in a year and a half, right? As of this recording, our coverage in the comics is not quite to Return of the Jedi yet.
Yeah, it's approaching, and you can feel that that like you can feel the treading of water even more as they're like, something's coming, but we can't really set it up.
And as a result, we get all of these little stories that are kind of pulp by their very nature. And by that, I mean, they are disposable. They are stories that are fun adventures happening in a galaxy far, far away, but aren't tying into these bigger narratives. And by that nature in the comics, it can feel like we're treading water because we're dealing with our main characters who we know are on this larger arc that is contained within the movies.
Right, that's the thing that really burns when it's Luke Skywalker not doing anything.
This show is doing the thing I've always loved about tertiary Star Wars media, though, and that is playing in the universe without being beholden to this grander narrative as set up in the movies. Now, you can dance around those events. Like, obviously, we're dancing in this era in which, okay, the New Republic is around, the Empire isn't around anymore. There is this sort of definitive, the good guys won vibe that this show plays with that I really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first show we've gotten that hasn't shown the New Republic as a bunch of bumbling idiots.
Yeah, yeah. Once again, I'm cycling through all the shows we've had. I think one of the interesting things about this, when you talk about, it's similar to, I was thinking this is very similar to what James Gunn was saying about his take on the DC universe. This kind of takes that attitude. It's like, this is a story that is set in the world of Star Wars, but it is not trying to build anything, at least based on what we've seen here, really towards like, you're never going to see Star Wars the same way again, or here's a thing that's going to retroactively be like, change your thinking of, the battle with the Empire or something like that.
Right. Obviously, it plays with certain foibles of continuity. There's the whole, planet being shrouded. Before I get too deep into this, we're going to spoil Skeleton Crew.
Oh, yeah.
Skeleton Crew is good. I think people should watch it.
According to every review or the thing I've seen, they aren't, so they should. Because I once again take for the grain of salt, but the litany of like, oh, no one's watching this thing.
Who knows?
I don't know, but yeah. According to the Nielsen ratings, which is unfortunately apparently still how we're measuring what people watch, which is crazy to me.
Insane.
Yeah.
But back to what I was saying, we're dealing with foibles of continuity vis-a-vis like the High Republic and the rise and fall of the Empire, and how, like, what if we isolate a planet from the events of Star Wars? Like, how would they react to the galaxy at large?
Yeah. I mean, they are and they aren't, right?
Yeah.
I will say the big thing I have coming out of this first season, it's not a negative of it by any means, is I still have a lot of questions about Atten, right?
Sure. Or all of those planets that are like the jewels of the High Republic.
They feel like they were, an abandoned idea, right? Like they were this idealized thing, and then the universe forgot about them. And so some thrived and some fell.
Yeah. That's how, like, why we get to Ad Akron and we see that it's like totally messed up. But Ad Atten somehow managed to make it through all this. Obviously, seeing the other planets in that like constellation of jewels would be interesting to see.
I mean, I know that I think another thing that's very satisfying is this does really feel like a beginning, middle, and end story, but also something that could go forward. Which totally. I think is very, very consciously done by its creators, who have talked about like, oh yeah, we know we have ideas for more seasons, but it's not about like there's no hint of that going into this. So it really did feel like, oh, I think in some ways that's why this felt the most to me like a Star Wars movie of any of the ones that have come out. Maybe is it's just like, oh, this does feel like if I saw this in a theater, maybe a little bit pared down, I would leave the theater going, oh, good, that was a Star Wars movie.
Because this is 8 episodes. Each is roughly like 30 to 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
So we're talking like 4 hours worth. Yeah, you could pare this down to a solid, shave it down to like 2.5 hours.
Well, what you would do is obviously lose some of the side adventures and stuff, right? In that, which I'm not saying that they should have done that, but I'm just talking about like if you were just to hit the main plot points, it makes a pretty good 3-act structure.
Totally,
and again, the fact that it's all written by 2 guys
certainly helps because a singular voice is nothing if not a boon to serialized storytelling.
Right. I think that's the thing is I feel like this was written as one thing, even though it was broken up, So I think that's why I think in some ways I feel like it's not like they consciously did this because of how this was produced, but it does sort of feel like the idea that if I'm to believe the ratings and people aren't watching this, it's like, it sounds like they're doing a lot of the stuff people complained about the other shows not doing, or whatever.
Because even if you consider it as like a beginning, middle, and end, it also does feel very episodic. Each episode is we go to a place, we have a little adventure, we leave the place, all in this like larger scheme to make the final jump home.
Yeah,
but
ever hoping that. I think that was the biggest surprise to me is that they got home. I expected this to be 5 seasons of them ever trying to get back home.
Sure, and I think continuing seasons of this show are dealing with the things that are like, okay, now At-Aten is trying to like get back into the galaxy at large. How does it like reacclimatize since the Republic that they knew effectively doesn't exist anymore?
I mean, the Ford and Watts have implied in interviews, I don't know if you've seen this, that we could be seeing Hondo Ohnaka as an antagonist on the second season.
Don't tease me like that, John. Yeah. Not my boy Hondo.
Yeah. No, yeah. They've been like, oh, we love that character. Oh, we love, right. They've done stuff like that where if we were to get a second season,
Sure.
And I just honestly just make up Jim Cummings.
I mean, that's all I want. Because the voice is so singular. I mean, alternatively, you could do the thing like you did with Cad Bane and Book of Boba Fett, where you get like a prosthetic actor and do...
because it would be so heavily prosthetic that you could kind of make any... That's what I'm saying. But because kind of anybody could be made up to look like Hondo.
Sure.
Or fucking get... I know you haven't been to Galaxy's Edge, Giriani. I don't mean to rub that in. But... just get the fucking animatronic from the ride.
That knife in me.
Sorry, because I will say the Hondo animatronic on the Falcon ride is very lifelike. Just get him. Just get the Imagineers to build you Hondo.
We got a spare Hondo in the back.
Yeah, we got that backup Hondo. So here you go. Yeah. Anyway, that would be very cool, and certainly we're in a world that Hondo would fit in, because I think the other big surprise for me when this thing started, I'm like, oh shit, this is a pirate show.
Hell yeah, it's a pirate show.
And it's not just a pirate show. It really is. We talk about, everybody says Star Wars Goonies, and I totally get that, because at least how it starts, right, with sort of suburban kids. But this is Star Wars Treasure Island is really what it is, right?
Because that's how this show starts, though, is like we open on pirates boarding a ship and killing a bunch of people, but then like the treasure comes up bust.
Yeah.
Like the pursuit of booty is at the heart of this show, and I love that.
The thing that's so cool about this, right, is it's Treasure Island or Treasure Planet, not the Disney movie, but in concept. But that it's a journey back to they were already on the Treasure Planet.
Yeah, that's the fun twist.
Very fun idea. But I mean, even things like, what is he, Captain Silvo?
He's Captain Silvo, maybe Jack Silvo, maybe he's Jod Nanawood.
But
he's a man of many names.
Captain Silva's a hop, skip, and a jump to Long John Silver, right?
Sure.
The antagonist of Treasure Island. Not expressly Treasure Island, but very classic literature piratey. We have a droid named SM-33, which of course is Smee, who's Captain Hook's right-hand man. There's a lot of fun. These guys know what they're doing. I will say that's something I think that I like about this too. There's a twinkle in the eye of this show that really hasn't been in a lot of Star Wars stuff.
No, absolutely. Even the original trilogy, like, there's not this wink and a nod necessarily. You don't start getting that sort of thing until the Ewoks movies, kind of.
I have seen some people go like, "Oh, these are kind of like the Ewoks movies," and I'm like, "Careful."
But good.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like you better watch yourself, counselor, because I see what you're saying, but that seems like criticism when I know it's not what you mean. But yes, there is sort of that idea about like. I also think a lot of people, and I remember, and I know people. I've told you I won't name them on the show because I'm not going to out them. But I've talked to people who are like, "I watched it. It fucking sucked. It's a kids show. It's a children's program. I'm an adult, and they're trying to sell me kids crap."
Nobody's trying to sell you anything. They already have your money.
Well, I mean, actually, everyone is trying to sell you everything, is what I would say. But
fair enough, yeah.
But this idea about like, this just like, oh man, Star Wars for kids now, which is hilarious. Because of course, it was always very consciously for kids. George Lucas loves to remind you of that.
I think it's this idea of empathy, right? That people butt up against. And this idea that I cannot empathize with the main characters of the show because they are like visibly 12-year-old children or 13 or whatever the age they're supposed to be. I read them as like 12, 13, 14, right?
Yeah. I mean, we talk about Goonies as the ultimate example, but just that idea about it's the same thing Stranger Things is Caribbean, right? The Amblin era of kids' adventure movies that weren't, but I think the thing to me that stands out about one of the reasons why we're so nostalgic for those movies is they weren't kids' movies. They were movies about kids, but they were very well made. They were written with a sophistication that was appealing to, the mythical all audiences concept.
Yeah. Let's see. Most of the kids here are like in real life 14 or 15.
Yeah, and we're probably a year younger when they shot this. So yeah, they're in that 13 to 14.
They were born in 2010.
Yeah, I know.
I'm withering away.
I know. Well, you're the one who, spends more time around children than I do, even. So that must be.
That's true.
How is that a new phenomenon for you?
That's fair. Yeah, I do. No one listening to the show would know, but I do work at a middle school / high school.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Hyundai Ioniq 6 versus Tesla Model.
Sorry,
John. I don't know how you feel about the Hyundai.
Let's take
Odyssey
a brief
6.
break to talk about our. Yeah, sorry. Man, I always have IMDb open. That's the first time I'd ever just started playing an ad. Thanks.
They're trying to sell you everything all the time, always.
I mean, I think that's the thing too. Is just sort of like, dude, they're always trying to sell. It's Disney. Geez, I mentioned the parks. Good God, you can't walk 5 steps without somebody trying to sell you something. So I think that's the idea. Is like this is a show about children. I will say, talking about that opening scene that you mentioned earlier certainly sets the tone of what kind of stakes we're dealing with here. Is just like murder.
Yeah,
like I mean, none of these are children who grew up in a consciously almost kind of becomes the point, artificially crafted idyllic world of no conflict, entering a Star Wars as we know it, just as dangerous, just as dark, with corners of violent, greedy people. So that's the thing is, for me, my pushback to that is, yes, these are children, but they've done nothing. This isn't the what's the Young Jedi Adventures kids show?
Yeah.
They're not taking the teeth out of the world of Star Wars. That's where I would start to be like, if this show was pulling back on like, yeah, they're pirates, but they don't really kill people or something. That's when I would start to get. But no, these kids are exposed to. I mean, the episode where they do go to the other planet is harrowing.
At Akron, yeah. Where it's like the two warring factions that are like perfectly happy to recruit these children to send in to die.
Yeah, and because that's just how it is. That's their life, It's like that might be my favorite singular episode simply because it's the most like, shit, this is how it is, man. Like, this is you kids don't know how bad it can get until you see a reflection of yourselves in, a nightmare.
Yeah, I do love the like resort episodes where they're finding their way into the the old captain's like secret base under the resort. That was so good.
That was great stuff too. I mean, once again, the other thing I think that I saw a lot of negativity from people right from the trailer is how suburban people are like, suburbs in Star Wars? No.
And again, like that specifically is at Aten, and that is specifically crafted to like create a docile populace on that planet. And I think as it becomes clear that that's the point of that world, that they're like hedged in and contained by this like larger force that doesn't understand the context of the rest of the galaxy, that's why you have this suburban, like slightly idealized nature. Like it's meant to serve as a point of juxtaposition, right?
Yes, and I think, but the thing I was going to say about that, and it's the same thing with the resort planet, I think this show has been really good at building out the world, and I think the shows in general have been good at expanding Star Wars so it feels like a bigger universe, which is something it has to do to be larger than the Skywalker saga. So we see this suburban planet, we see this like spa resort planet, we're seeing stuff that feels new to Star Wars, and that's exciting to me. It's like, oh yeah, within this universe, we all know there's all these little pockets.
Yeah.
And like to me, it never, from the trailers, it never seemed weird to me that there would be just regular folk who, even before I knew the plot of the show, being that Aten is consciously cut off, this idea about just like the universe is just so big, there probably would just be people blissfully living their lives unaware of the conflict, or just sort of going like, yeah, I mean, the Empire's in charge now. Hey man, I still got to pay my taxes or whatever. You know, it's like I still got to go to work in the morning. I think that's fascinating to me.
We saw a little bit of that in Obi-Wan, and I think that was one of the strengths of that show, was being able to see a galaxy reacting to the Empire was like firmly in charge at that point, and some people are just trying to get by. And like some people are wheeling and dealing inside of that system, but some people, like that one little truck driver that Obi-Wan runs into, is just like, yeah, Empire's great. Things have really settled down since the Clone War.
And like, yeah, for some people, I mean, that makes sense, right? Some people would just be like, I mean, it's the Mussolini thing, right? Well, the trains run on time.
Yeah.
If you're not actively seeing the atrocities, you're going like, oh man, everything seems pretty efficient. I don't know, it's too big to comprehend all the things that are going on. Not everyone would be aware of the tyranny of the Empire. Right. Even the people of Tatooine, even, right? Like, are so far out, they're just like, hey man, I'm not worried about the Emperor because we've got the fucking Hutt cartel. That's our problem. We got local crime. Okay.
Luke, in the beginning of A New Hope, is looking to join the Imperial Academy just to get off of Tatooine.
People forget that. I think people really forget what academy he's talking about, right? Like, it's an interesting thing. Because, of course, that's more so if you've seen the deleted scene with Biggs, where he's like, I'm going off to join the rebellion. It's like, what, are you crazy?
Because Biggs has already left to join the Academy, which is the Imperial Academy.
Right. The bad guys. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the other thing that's so delightful in this show is the myths of Star Wars that we know as the franchise being the myths of this world. Wim having the book about the Jedi and the idea. I mean, I will never talk, and I loved it in Last Jedi as well. Kids in Star Wars playing Star Wars. When him and Neil are at the bus stop playing lightsabers. I mean, because that's like kids playing knights or pirates or, whatever, right?
That is it exactly. Is kids playing the things out of what have become like societal myth. And to most of the galaxy at large, that's all the Jedi ever were. And even at the like fall of them during the Clone War, it's like, oh, these weird wizards that most people will never meet one in their entire life turned out to be bad guys. Okay, I guess.
Yeah. Well, because it's also a thing where it's like, I mean, because once again, I've talked to people about this who go like, it's not far enough in the past to be the way, whatever. Okay. It's just like something from 30 years. It'd be like us. I don't know though, because it is kind of like us talking about like old gangsters or something like that. Like Al Capone wasn't that far back, but he feels mythic, or something like that. But I mean, the idea that that it's just like, hey, that was a thing. I don't know. Some people say this, some people say that. I don't know. They seem cool, at least aesthetically.
It turned out that like the original iteration of the FBI as put together to defeat like the gangsters of the 20s like went rogue and had to be destroyed.
Right. Yeah.
And we were told that like 20 years down the line we would be like, all our histories say that they went bad.
Is Obi-Wan Kenobi the Elliot Ness of Star
No.
Yeah. But that's it exactly. And so this idea about like, I don't know, man. And like I said, I think especially to the people of Atten, they don't really care. You know, it's like
they're even more removed from everything.
They're further removed. They're another step removed. Because I still do have questions, and I love that the show didn't ever fully leave them. But this whole idea about like, you guys seem like you're in like a classic dystopian futuristic society where we're all doing what do they call it, like the great work, or what's the important?
The great work, which is a thing from, I know you haven't really touched much of the High Republic stuff.
Yeah, some of the comics, but not,
Yeah. This is like firmly a High Republic thing, which when they said that, I was just like, ooh, pointing at the screen.
Yeah.
There's the great work of the High Republic in that era is this whole idea of like pushing the boundaries of the Republic further, not through conquest, but through good works. So there's this, and like obviously there are bad guys that are looking to thwart that because they see it as just a different kind of imperialism, right? When that's kind of one of the central themes of the High Republic stuff, which I've really enjoyed.
Well, and then when we come to what's running the thing, the administrators, they call it, is basically HAL 9000.
The big red glowing eye. You destroy the whole machine just by poking it in the eyeball? Sure, why not? That's Star Wars.
That's classic, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to let's talk about the kids first, because of course this is an adventure, and I think boy, what makes or breaks these things are the kids you cast, and they did a really good job here finding kids who, it's a tricky thing, right? Because kids either feel like they're babies or they feel like they're 45-year-olds. You know what I mean? Like, depending on how you write them. I feel like those are often the way. I trusted in John Watts because having seen all of Watts' work, he's always been good at writing young characters. People certainly would know him from having done the 3 Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. But the movie that got him that was a Sundance film called Cop Car that... I'm one of 8 people that saw, but it's a really good movie that is about kids, two like 12-year-olds who steal a police car that they don't know belongs to super crooked Kevin Bacon. It's actually, there's a lot of aspects of this story in that movie, and then end up like there are drugs in that car that belong to a cartel, and it's a whole thing. Anyway, they get pulled into this crime thing. So I trusted in him to be able to write that, and Christopher Ford, who's his writing partner, and they go. One of the fun things that I learned from I watched the directors roundtable for this, that they had all the directors from the show.
Oh, yeah.
Ford and Watts and Bryce Dallas Howard all went to college together.
Oh, wow. Did not know that.
Yeah. So you're talking about also a group of people who, like we're talking about, not only do we have sort of a small creative circle here, but people who have been collaborators for a long, long time on a lot of stuff too, which certainly aids it. And then they also brought in David Lowery, who just made the live-action Peter Pan movie for Disney, which he talked about was with Jude Law as Captain Hook. So he said it was very strange to go from that to making another pirate thing with Jude Law and a bunch of kids. Right.
Speaking of the kids, we've got Ryan Kira Armstrong as Fern. We've got Kiriana Crater. I don't know how to say her last name. As KB.
We butcher names. It's mainly what we do on this show.
Yeah, it's true. Robert Timothy Smith as Neil, and Ravi Cabot Conyers as Wim.
Yeah. And
I think they're all great. I don't think there's a weak link in those 4.
No, I think they're all really well cast and really well directed, and once again, really well served by the writing.
I think the kid who plays Neil maybe has the easiest job in terms of acting because obviously he's. I don't actually know how they achieve the character of Neil. I'll be curious to see, like, they usually release like a mini doc about these series after the fact. I'll be curious to watch this one and see if there's any insight into how they realize the character of Neil. Like, is that kid in prosthetics or is he just doing the voice?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I know it's an animatronic. I mean, I know it's a remote controlled, radio head that's doing all the acting. And I've seen some of the behind the scenes stuff. If it is him, it's certainly not him all the time.
Sure. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. So I don't know. But it's the answer is a lot of people made Neil come to life.
Sure. Yeah. As is always the case with these like alien creatures.
But very much using in a way that the franchise has been moving towards doing things like they would have done them practically back in the 80s. I mean, certainly with improved things, but like the idea that Neil's not a CGI creation. He's an actor in a suit with a remote controlled head,
Right, because 10 years ago, a character like that may have just been a completely CG character that will like if they're doing it well 10 years ago, it would have been an actor that they're then transposing like Gollum. But these days it's a blend of practical effects and CG touch-ups, which honestly, best of both worlds.
Yeah, I'm looking at it here. They're talking about it's a mix of motion capture and animatronics.
Now, again, mostly just curious whether or not Robert Timothy
That's what
was
I'm looking
on
up.
set.
That's what I'm looking up to see.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's still the answer.
But again, we'll find out. Maybe there'll be a bit in the mini doc about that. I'll be curious to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, between the four of them, I think they all do a good job. I think they all get like a good little arc over the course of the show. I think Wim is obviously like kind of our central protagonist.
There's got to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of the thing about whether that's Mikey in the Goonies or even we see that on Stranger Things with Finn Wolfhard's character, right? Is that there's usually sort of a de facto leader, protagonist character, and some of the things I like in this is sort of the tension between him and Fern about who the leader is, because she's bossy. She's not the lead, sort of the thing where it's like he's the hero of the show, right? He represents he's the one who loves the story of the Jedi. He's then sort of thing like that. She's a take charge kind of person, but they're almost. I mean, they're not this thing. I'm not being reductionist, but at least very, 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 very structurally, they have sort of a Luke and Leia dynamic in that sense, right?
Sure. Wim is captivated by the adventure of the thing, whereas Fern is just looking at the next objective and trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And obviously the fun with the Fern character is the fact that she just has a lot of bluster and bravura and is kind of making it up as she goes along.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Wim is kind of like consciously doesn't know what he's doing, but is just enjoying the ride.
Right, exactly. So it's a fun, and then you have, once again, these are very classic sort of stereotypes of not just kid stuff, but sort of any group dynamic. You've got your scaredy cat in Neil, and you've got your smart kid in KB.
Yeah.
KB, who's got a visor, which immediately makes me like her because it makes me think of Geordie LaForge.
Well, and she is such a insert for like the kid with the inhaler, right? Like something's going to go wrong with the kid who's like maybe not quite on the same level, like some kind of physical impediment in this kid, whether like in some movies they've got a limp, in some movies they're like in a wheelchair. In this one, it's KB has these implants like Lobot that like can shut down her whole body if they go haywire.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I have an answer. It's a combination of the kid and a performance artist that switched on between doing it. So sometimes it is the actual young actor.
Okay, cool.
In the Neil outfit.
Good for him.
Yeah. They talked about they used a bunch of different things. There were less versions of the head with less animatronics, ones that then were sort of a flat face with dots that they could CGI onto. They also tried to do a lot of facial work with the actor performing the scenes with dots to capture. So it's a whole process. Like we're talking about, it's the best of. They used like 4 different techniques to bring this to life
and blended it all together to make something that,
Yeah.
again, I think looks great.
It's the thing I always say when people go like, get CG edits. Well, CG is a tool. So is animatronics. So is model design. So is everything. Using all of them it's a toolbox. Use whatever is going to work the best or find a combination. I don't like when people get that dogmatic about stuff.
But then you have a character like Brutus, the like evil pirate captain that they're up against for most of the show, which is like a big practical animatronic freaking werewolf pirate.
I love all the pirate designs in this. I want to live in the pirate world. By the way, Disney, give me this in a theme park. Give me Pirate World, because it's so.
Star Wars Tortuga is.
Man, I'm just saying, you could reskin the Pirates of the Caribbean ride pretty easily. Not because it's a classic, and particularly the original one at Disneyland is still one of my favorite rides. It's very impressive. But every one of these pirates is so fun, and every one of them is such a weird Star Wars-y thing. You've got Werewolf Captain. You've got Urkel with a cyber eye. You've got.
I love Jaleel White in this show. It's just like he's there. He's having fun.
Oh, and I've seen interviews. He's so happy to be here. He's just. I think he's always happy when anybody's like, "You're not Urkel."
Yeah, that's fair.
He's talked about that's the one thing that bothers him. He's happy to talk to people about Family Matters. Please don't call me Urkel.
I feel like that's disrespectful to people to just call them their character names.
Said, I'm happy to talk to you all day about your favorite Urkel moments. Just please don't call me Urkel. And I think that's fine. That's fair. That's a totally fair thing. Because I did, surprising no one, read his recently released memoir, Growing Up Urkel.
That's totally fair.
It's an interesting thing to get that famous that young. But anyway, yes, all the designs of all all the designs in general in the show, but yes, all the weird pirates. The first couple episodes when they're in the sort of way station for scoundrels and shit, is very classic Star Wars without it feeling like this is our cantina scene. You know what I mean?
But it does. It provides the same. Level of scope as the cantina scene, right? It's this idea of our characters who are slightly sheltered walking into a larger world and seeing that there is this tangle of scum and villainy out there, that any one of these characters has a story, and I'm sure this being Star Wars, they're all going to get their little action figures with names, the Gluck Shadows of the Galaxy.
They're already out there, man. I've seen the Black Series Skeleton Crew figures.
The three-eyed guy where one of the eyes is missing, so he still has 2 eyes, but one has an eye patch. Classic.
Yeah. It's great. Everything is very strange and alien in a way. I think that's one of the things people love about Star Wars is it really does feel like this lived-in world of like, God, there's just like, what's that guy's deal? You feel like, I think that's always the thing, right, that captured the imagination of people with Star Wars specifically, is you feel like every one of these people could have their own movie. And you could be like, what's his deal, man? What's this thing? Don't do that, Disney. I see you. But
that's one of the fun bits about the spine of this show is the unraveling the mystery of the ship they are in to begin with, right? Yes. Is one of the narrative arcs of this show is untangling this like pirate legend that these kids have stumbled into, a la Goonies.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think one of the things I said immediately after just watching the first 2 episodes that I was trying to tell when I was trying to get people to watch this was I said this has the most feeling of sheer adventure that I've seen in Star Wars since A New Hope, honestly. Like the idea about like, man, this world is limitless and full of things we don't know about.
Say what you will about Attack of the Clones, but it also sort of has that vibe in terms of just like, one of the problems with that movie is how disjointed it feels, but that's because all the characters are off doing weird things in different corners of the galaxy.
Sure. But I think similar to what you brought up about the Acolyte, there's also this inherent tragedy to it, right?
Yeah, and this show doesn't have that.
It's always for every bit of youthful adventure we see with Anakin, we know that's another step closer to becoming Darth Vader. So it's always this push and pull of, oh no, we have this romance, but oh fuck, this guy's gonna go bad. I mean, and that I think is the prequels at their best, right? Is this grand Shakespearean tragedy. I always talk about I will die on the hill of the story those movies are telling is amazing, not the execution. The actual, if I was to, I think I heard somebody else say that if I was to just tell you the story of the downfall of Anakin Skywalker, you'd be like, wow, what a great tale. It's like, yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff I left out. But if I just gave you the downfall of Anakin Skywalker, it's an amazing classic tragedy. But I think that's the thing is this, on that note, one of the things that is so fun about this show, and I think one of the reasons why, I will say, whether people watch it or not, the reviews for this have been fantastic, and I've seen limited shittiness, which is unusual for Star Wars. You've got people kind of going belly aching here and there, but
sure, the number of people though that I've seen, and look, I haunt the Star Wars subreddit. I won't make any bones about it. The number of posts I've seen on there, though,
shocked, by the way, yeah,
I know, yeah, shocking no one. Yeah. The number of posts I've seen on there about people saying like, I was sort of checked out of Star Wars. This has reignited my passion for the world. It has been very heartening when it comes to people's reaction to Skeleton Crew.
It's an interesting thing, right? Because what I was going to say is it's so freed of all this baggage. And I think that in some ways, I know there are people who are like, yeah, I like what Ahsoka's doing, but I don't know what the hell anyone's talking about because I didn't watch Rebels, or whatever. Sure. And I get that. I mean, I think the show does a good enough job of telling a story, but I do get it. Like, they expect me to know who Ezra is, and I'm just like, oh, they found a guy. Like, okay, fair. This is so. I think I heard somebody say, if you know what a Jedi is, you can watch this show. And I think that's kind of true. I think there's the other thing the thing that I think is very interesting is that you say this has reignited their passion for the world, because I find that interesting because it's also, and I don't mean this as a criticism, purposely slight. Which like I said, I think that's a good thing. I think this is what I thought the Star Wars stories were going to be like when they were doing, we're going to make saga movies and we're going to make story movies. The fact that it started with Rogue One, you're like, okay, well, you're telling a side story of a thing that's very, very connected to your saga. And same thing with Solo, right? This is the kind of the first one that's like, oh yeah, this is like truly a side story.
This is where some of the peaks of the Clone Wars get to, right? Where it's like the Clone Wars has ups and downs. No one's denying that. That show is by no means like a masterpiece. There are weak points and there are strong points.
Like any show, there's just too much of it for it to be, I mean, they just made too many episodes for it to all be working.
But some of the strong points there are pretty disconnected from everything else. You talk about Hondo Ohnaka, like almost any episode with Hondo is basically unimportant to the like larger saga. There's a couple of exceptions, like the ones where he kidnapped Dooku. That was great.
No, I mean, he floats around. I mean, and Rebels even has stuff like that to a certain extent, in that they're opening you up to like, oh shit, I never thought about that. I mean, like, and that's kind of the fun of these things. That's embracing that while you aren't impacting maybe the larger canon, you're also freed, like I said, of the shackles of having to play around with that. Even things like the opening, text of this show. It's not a crawl. I almost said crawl. It's not that, because only the talk is.
It does not crawl.
Yeah, but just the idea about like the Empire has fallen, the New Republic is taking over. That has opened up piracy, and you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like,
totally.
Kind of no one's minding the store, so like crime is on the rise.
Yeah,
cool, great setting. Mm-hmm. Even though Mandalorian takes place in that same time period, it doesn't really lean into that because it's doing other stuff. A little bit.
It does, because like there's that whole thing in the third season where there's that like pirate armada that the Mandalorians have to band together to beat.
There is, but it's not. I mean, maybe it's not. It's not framed in the same way. Like the idea that this can really dig into that, where it's just like, well, yeah, there's always baddies out there and stuff like that, and because Mandalorian's just got other things on his mind. But the idea that's like, okay, if this, then this sort of thing is like, if this is happening, then we bring our characters into that, and now we have a story, and then adding the idea that Adden is a treasure planet, which it is.
Yeah. The Old Republic Mint. I love that idea of just like, well, who makes all those little coins that they start tossing around? Well, there's a big droid somewhere that does it.
Because that leads us to something I want to talk about, which is, I think, also hugely important to this show. And that's the performance of Jude Law. And I jump off of that because maybe my favorite bit of acting is a nonverbal moment from him when he sees the gold.
When he gets into the Mint, like, he's such a fun character in like a classic vein of the adult in kids movies or movies about kids that you don't know if you can trust or not, right? Like, that's such a classic archetype.
And that's so much
it's
of
Long John Silver.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, that's the archetype. I'm sure he's not even the first one, but at least for me, that's what I think of as the archetype of that. And it's something Watson Ford talked about, was at the core of this is a story about that loss of innocence moment when you learn that adults can't be trusted. That's the cornerstone of this. And also, you can really tell in the show that when I see Jude Law in interviews go like, oh, this is maybe the most I've enjoyed doing anything. And you can really feel that. What a gift to him.
It's such a nuanced character, though, because it would be so easy to be just a total bastard that is like a werewolf pirate. But this is a guy who, like, even at his worst, he never, like, actively is trying to hurt these kids. He does, at the end of the day, just want the gold. That's his, like... And when he finally gets into that vault and there's this moment of just like, yes, this is everything I've worked for. When the gold starts like falling down on him and he's like
putting his hands through the like,
the
gold. But it's like, he's kind of, and it makes sense that like when we find him, at least, unhelmeted, he's been, thrown off because kind of a bad pirate.
A little bit of a bad pirate, but he's not so bad of a pirate that he's not going to execute Brutus later after having been mutinied.
No, I mean, it's an interesting thing, but it sort of does feel like he, this guy, he is, I always talk about, I like when they do all these characters go back to why Han Solo is my favorite character in Star Wars, because when you meet guys like this, you're like, oh, that's what most Han Solos are like.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they have a core of humanity to them, which this character definitely does, he's not going to turn around and join the rebellion. Like, Han Solo is a rarity. I like when we meet scoundrels, and it's one of the reasons I like Benicio del Toro's character in Last Jedi, right? Where he's like, oh no, that guy just stabbed you in the back. Not because he's evil, but because he's like, no, they made a better deal.
I mean, it's the shades of difference between Han and Lando, right? Like, Lando sort of has to be pried into being more heroic.
He's being guilted into it, right? It's like because of what happened to Han and stuff. He's like, well, I feel bad about that.
Whereas Han was like, okay, you just have to rub the rust off, and there's a good guy underneath there. Whereas Jude Law's character in this is like mostly rust at this point.
It's the thing I love in Solo. Right, where Kira says to him, it's like, I know your secret. What's that? That you're the good guy.
Yeah.
It's like, he's a good guy pretending to be an asshole. And I love that. Whereas this guy really is, but there's still enough. Once again, he's not Werewolf Pilot. He's not Cyber Urkel. His character apparently
what did we just say about calling him Urkel?
I know, but apparently his character's name is Gunter. I didn't remember them ever saying.
They say his name a couple of times.
Yeah. He's around. He stands out because, number one, I know Jaleel White, and he does have a cool like cyborg guy or like a weird. It's a cool design.
He's like a pirate Borg.
Yeah, but like these guys are real deal baddies, and he's pretty bad.
He's pretty bad. He'll threaten kids with lightsabers, but he's never he never actually hurts any of the kids. And what the show
kinda
does
know.
very well is towing the line between like, would this guy ever actually hurt the kids? I don't know.
I think definitively at the end of it, no, because there's a couple times he could have. There's a couple
Yeah.
at the end he could have killed. The smart move would have been to kill them at the end of it. Like his plan fails because he isn't heartless enough to pull the trigger on a kid. He's got them at gunpoint.
Yeah. And lightsaber point.
And lightsaber. Well, when he busted out a lightsaber, it was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This shit, and the parlance of Bad Boys 2, this shit just got real.
This shit just got real.
Because I do like that whole thing too, where they're like, "Oh, he's a Jedi," and I think you and I, obviously, even from the trailers, are like, "Sure, he is." You know, like that seems impossible. But so the whole thing, then it becomes this thing. Because I also like that we had the Kumail Nanjiani character in Obi-Wan, who was a guy pretending to have the Force. So I'm going like, well, how much is he fucking with them? And then as you watch the show, you're going like, he does seem to actually does have Force abilities. And then when you finally get his explanation is that he was a guy kind of half trained by a Jedi right before.
Jod is a character that is Ezra Bridger if his master dies, right? It's a guy someone who survived Order 66, found this Force sensitive kid and was like, well, I need to help you because I'm a Jedi and I know what is good and right to do. But as opposed to Ezra, who like got a pretty robust amount of training from oh my god,
Kanan.
why am I blank? From Kanan, like Jod's master, whoever that was hunted and killed, like most of the other Jedi.
Another thing I was very glad wasn't like, someone we knew.
Yeah.
That would have at every turn they eschew a specific reference for a broad Star Wars reference, right?
Yeah. The fact that we acknowledge Order 66 in this show as like when they finally meet the big supercomputer, it says like, well, the last thing I heard from the Republic was that all the Jedi had betrayed the Republic, implying that this place was still getting transmissions right up until the Empire took over.
Yeah.
I found that pretty good.
I still have a lot of questions about AT-AT, not in a way that I'm actually like dying to know the answers to, but just like curious questions, that maybe could be explained in a novel or comic book.
I'm looking for the art, but I saw somebody came out on, I want to say it was Instagram or something, saying they had been cast and shot scenes as Jod's master, sort of implying that there was like a flashback scene that was filmed, but then not used.
Yeah, maybe.
Which I think is smart. I don't. Yeah. We need to center the show on the kids, not on Jod.
Yeah, I think the show does a good job of making him a supporting character to all of them, right? Like everything he does advances all of their stories. Mm-hmm. And they talked about he really also sort of served that function. I saw Watts talking about this on the set, right? That he sort of set the template for these kids of he's the star, he's an established, because this is my thing about, and I think you can hear me say this if you're one of our patrons and listen to us talk about Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow on our IP squad, but like always a guy who I thought is a fantastic actor, and like a lot of people, but very early in his career got pegged as pretty because he's very handsome. But it's like, no, but this guy's got real deal chops. And you see that here. And I think, like a lot of these guys, as he's gotten older, people have been like, hey, who's really good? Jude Law.
Turns out, he's quietly been great forever.
He wasn't just like some hunky dude from the UK. It's like, actually, because I've talked before about, I think he is the whole deal in those Sherlock Holmes movies, those Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock, Downey as Holmes, whatever. I'm watching because Law as Watson is so good in those, and I think he brought a lot of interesting levels to Yon-Rogg in Captain Marvel, which could have been a total throwaway part, but it almost feels like a not quite as in-depth version of this character. Like where it's sort of just because of the nature of that movie. I'm not faulting that movie.
Sure.
But
here we go. Yasmin Al-Masri said that she was cast as a Jedi Master in a deleted scene from Skeleton Crew.
Oh, okay. I mean, like I said, I could totally see them shooting that and then going, we don't need it. That makes a lot of sense.
And she has like photos of herself on Instagram in like full Jedi outfit.
I don't know that anything would have been, and also like you talked about, it would have been strange to go to something purely from his perspective. That would have been an internal thing, like a flashback, especially because also the show doesn't have any other flashbacks.
Yeah, and again, didn't necessarily need that.
But it feels like something that they would have maybe thought, let's shoot that.
Yeah. And maybe they could have done it artfully in terms of like, we have Wim with that storybook of like how he perceives the Jedi and maybe doing some.
By the way, Disney, get on making that somehow.
It'd be a pop-up book, right?
I'm sure they will. It's a pop-up book with lights, basically, right? Like,
yeah.
They'll figure it out. They'll look, if there's something to be made, they'll make it. The amount of merchandise of Kim or however it's Kim, but it's spelled weird. I want to emphasize that the
Space
owl,
Kim.
Yeah, the owl person that they go and talk to, voiced by Alia Shawkat from Arrested Development.
Man, what a good alien design. I love weirdo Star Wars aliens. Like, it's one of the things that makes Star Wars so special to me is just how bonkers they go with some of their creature designs in terms of like, what are the aliens? Even if they're just in the background. This show happened to highlight like a weird owl cat librarian that was super fun. But like
a little cape.
It's why I've always sort of preferred Star Wars over Star Trek. Star Trek is like, look, we've got some interesting aliens in that show, but most part, everyone's just humans with a different head. And that's fine. And that show like is doing different things.
Well, you're going to know that because they were all descendant from one drop of DNA that was...
Yeah. But Star Wars has Wookiees.
Yeah. I will say, somebody who's having a lot of fun that comes into this show for a couple episodes is Kelly MacDonald, who plays the bounty hunter pirate woman on the Spa planet, who actually does look the most like a Star Trek villain in terms of she's just Kelly MacDonald with a weird haircut and eye contacts. But once again, is having a lot of fun. It's just like, hey, Jod, I'm gonna have to arrest you now. Like,
wouldn't it suck if our past got in the way of what you're doing? Yeah, it would, wouldn't it?
It's just like fellow scoundrel. Like, neither one of these people has the moral high ground here.
No.
It's great. And also shout out to a character actor I've always really liked, Julianne Emery, who's just the like representative of that spa resort, who's just like, I have to be nice because my job, but all of this is weird.
All of this is terrible.
Sure, we're all going to pretend that any of this is decent until it all goes to hell. Yeah. You're obviously all criminals.
I love the random hut that was in the spa planet. I love the reference to the banking guild being there, which is why the security has been tightened. Like, reference to a like background faction from the Clone Wars, the banking guild.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like everything in the show is to serve living in the world. It's not to serve, hey, look, like it's not Wedge that comes and saves them. It's just X-Wing pilots.
Heck, it's not even like
Dave Filoni or the guy from Kim's Convenience.
Yeah. Who have become kind of like our face X-Wing pilots over the course of The Mandalorian.
Well, I love, if it was them, I would have been delighted. It's not like I would have been mad about that. But I do like the idea. It's just like, no, there's like a bunch of X-Wing squadrons. These were the guys who were in the area.
Yeah.
And it's very cool to once again see the characters react like we would, where they're like, X-Wings!
Well, and this show also gives us the first, like, in-action shots of B-Wings, which I love.
That's true.
Live action, I should say. We get some of it in Rebels.
Yeah.
But seeing the B-Wings, like, have that, like, little laser focus into the center and just rake across the pirate ship, I was like, yeah, B-Wings! I had that Lego set.
But there's it's also really interesting to see, once again, and which you do get pieces of this in Mandalorian and Ahsoka, right? Of, like, the New Republic has to be, like, the police now. All right, shut it down. Pull it over. Pull over.
Mm-hmm.
You pirates, man. We got to cite you for something.
But yeah, I mean, I like that Jude Law's character, like, probably gets away at the end of this season. We don't see him get arrested or anything.
And once again, the last shot of him is totally not mustache Troy. It's just like, okay. Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of got this grin on his face, like, okay, everything's going to shit, but I can roll with this.
But also sort of just like, well, I've been bested. And it's almost game recognized game where he's just like, well, this was one of the things that could happen. It did. And on to the next thing. You know, like it's, there is no doubt in my mind that we're going to get, whatever you want to call him, Jod, comic book series. Like it seems like the perfect character to do ancillary other material with, or an audio adventure or something.
John, he will always be Crimson Jack to me.
Yeah, he's one of his names, of course, Crimson Jack.
We haven't even really talked about the whole design aesthetic of SM-33, which I love.
And
it's like
also,
cantankerous pirate droid.
Yeah, now firmly one of my favorite droids in Star Wars, with a little, talk about another weird little creature that lives in his empty eye socket.
And like, why would you need to give the droid a peg leg when you could just attach a new leg to him? It's just like these quirky little design features.
And
so good.
The amazing performance of Nick Frost as the voice of him.
I mean, he's just playing an old pirate, but I'll give it to him.
Pirate, but he's going for. And I love at the end when he, saves them, and he's holding his own head like it's a helmet. He's just like, not one of my final landings, but I'll. It's like, oh my god, it's so good. By the way, the amount that the Disney Plus Star Wars shows have given work to British comedians as the voice of droids. Because we've had a Richard Iowade droid, we've had a Matt Berry droid, we've had now Nick Frost droid. They're perfect. They're the perfect people to be the voice of droids. And I'm sure they're all also people who'd be like, Star Wars? Are you kidding me?
Well, they're hoping to get that Anthony Daniels money.
Well, everybody's hoping to get. Well, Nick Frost though is our kind of nerd that we know who would just be like, I'll pay them. Simon Pegg also, of course, in Force Awakens.
Yeah, true.
So both of those guys have been in Star Wars now.
SM-33 is definitely up there in terms of like, he hasn't crossed the K2SO barrier. Like that's still the top of droids for me.
That's number one droid for you?
I mean, it's either him or HK-47, and they're of a similar mold.
HK-47, wow.
I mean, look, HK-47 is like the classic, like, I will kill you droid in Star Wars for me.
Yeah. I mean, well, what are you talking about? Well, I guess that's another thing, too, is then you start to get into, like, because, like, what are you talking about with droids? Because, are you talking protocol droids? You talking astromech droids? Because I have a lot of affinity for Chopper.
Sure, Chopper's great.
But I'm sorry, it's still 3PO and R2. Do they not count? Because
3PO and R2 are a separate. They're their own thing.
They're the goats, man. They're the OGs. They have my heart forever. They are Star Wars. That's
like saying, like, who's your favorite Jedi? And it's like, okay, Luke. Remove Luke from the conversation.
Okay, yeah. Then in that case, it would be Chopper. Would be my favorite. Then.
Chopper's definitely in my top 5.
Love Chopper, but yeah, SM-33 is probably cracked my top 5 along with K2SO as well. But yeah, and also he's so they make him so endearing.
Sure. And like when he gets to go berserk and like uses his shields and they get heated up by the blasters and he uses the heated up shield to burn a pirate, that was just like, brutal.
So rad. One is and like a lot of stuff in Star Wars, the fact that he's kind of janky and broken down, adds to and that's the same thing with the ship. It's like an old ship, but it's cool. And the fact that it doesn't work a lot that's classic Star Wars. I mean, look, our most beloved ship is always referred to as a hunk of junk. The Falcon is always broken down and people shit on, and
And look, I can't wait for the Lego set where I can remove the outer hull of the Onyx Cinder. Is that the name of the ship?
You would have paid attention to that more than I would have.
I know I would. But like the fact that you can remove the whole exterior of the ship and you have this sleek, awesome, like
that was very cool when that happened.
Yeah. It definitely was giving me some like Naboo royal ship vibes to it.
Which I gotta say are one of my favorite kinds of ship design. All the Naboo ships are so awesome.
That's true. Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
The Naboo starfighters are just some of the coolest looking ships in Star Wars.
Yeah, when the Mandalorian got his like Naboo starfighter,
Yeah.
that was very. The best part of the Book of Boba Fett was the episode that didn't have Boba Fett, where he got a Naboo starfighter.
That was pretty rad. By the way, speaking of Lego, I've been hearing rumblings about them doing Star Trek ships.
Next, it's confirmed that as of 2025, that Q3, Q4, they're doing the Enterprise D. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. No, I'm gonna have to sell some stuff off, and
That is going to take up a prodigious amount of shelf space.
yeah, I know. I already have to start planning for that, but I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah, because I've managed to avoid a lot of the Star Wars ones, but I'm like, oh god.
Boy, like you tilt this camera you're looking at me through slightly
Yeah.
up, you'll see the Death Star.
Yeah. No, but that's the thing where it's like I can kind of go like, well, where did I put that star? But then, oh, as an Enterprise, you say, oh shit. Okay, yeah. So,
Man,
yeah.
John, if they start doing all the different Enterprises,
I know, we're in
just the
trouble.
Enterprises.
Just the Enterprises, because let's not even get into my favorite Star Trek ship, the Klingon Bird of Prey. If they do a
Or,
Bird
like,
of Prey,
God forbid if they do like an even like somewhat to scale like DS9, like if they did it on the same scale as the Death Star.
yeah, or a Borg cube.
Ooh, boy, yeah.
I could be in real trouble. This apartment could be filled with ships. It was always headed that direction, though. Let's be honest. All right, yeah. Let's see. What else do we want to? Oh, we didn't really talk about the parents.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, they're just there to be like, oh no, our kids are missing.
I think that the two that really is Wim's dad and Fern's mom kind of become the leads of that, right?
That's Tunde Adebimpe as Wendell and Carrie Condon as Farah.
Well, I love Carrie Condon, and one could argue if they were being, kind of mean to this, she's objectively maybe slumming it in this. In how small a role this is for how good an actor she is.
What do I know her from?
I don't know if you would. I mean, you would probably know her best as the voice of Friday, the Iron Man interface.
Oh no, she was Ehrmantraut's daughter in Better Call Saul.
She was, yeah, and she's in
100%.
a lot of Irish films that are very good.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of Martin McDonagh, you know who she is. She was also on My Beloved Ray Donovan.
Oh, and she was in Banshees of Inisherin.
Sheeran, yeah, she's the female lead in that. She's wonderful.
Yeah.
Also, I can't recommend enough an Irish movie that not enough people saw called In the Land of Saints and Sinners with her and Liam Neeson, which is a great movie. She's very good in it. It kind of got lost in the shuffle. It's not a Liam Neeson movie, and we all know what that means when I say the subgenre that is a Liam Neeson movie.
I'm old, but I will kill you.
I mean, it's kind of that, but it's an Irish independent movie. It's actually about like steeped in the politics of Ireland and the IRA. So once again, aesthetically, he is a broken down old killer, yes, but it's a serious minded movie.
Okay.
But Liam Neeson still has a shotgun on the poster. Don't worry about it.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's
That's how you get butts and seats.
She's fucking great in that. So anyway, she's really good here. Like I said, doing a smaller role, but like I said, they sort of become, and also we get there. I do really like, and this is very Amblin-y, right? They're sort of through, they're not neglectful of their children, but they're definitely like, oh, you kids, and then
it's the latchkey kid thing that was like birthed in the 80s and 90s.
Look, we love you kids, but like we got to go to work.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, hey, and also there's a lot of like, particularly obviously with Wim, where it's like, oh, stop living in the stars and get. I mean, there's something very funny about you're 12, get serious about your career already.
I did the line from Wendell, Wim's dad, just like, son, you're talking to a level 6 systems manager. Of course I can get the power back on.
I love the idea that he becomes like badass with that by the end is great. I found him very charming. He's in an exceptional movie called Rachel Getting Married. That's a tiny little indie, that actor, that people should see. That's a Jonathan Demme film with Anne Hathaway. Great movie, tiny little drama, exact opposite of Star Wars. But Anyway, he was also in Twisters, apparently, which I've forgotten because I forgot most of Twisters immediately after seeing it.
Oh, there's so many people in Twisters that you'll just.
Oh,
be
no,
like, they were in that movie.
Yeah, Superman's in that movie. But it's like I saw that with my dad. He goes, I said, the guy who's going to play Superman's in that. He said, who was he in that? I go, I'm like, he's the guy who's a foot taller than everyone else in the movie. The guy that looks like Superman. You're like, that guy's a superhero. I don't know about the rest of you. Anyway.
Why isn't he fighting the tornado?
Yeah. No, he's corporate bad guy who's like, I don't care if people die. I have to make money. I think he literally says that at one point. Anyway, I didn't like Twisters. I'm sorry. If you did, that's great. It's okay to like a movie. I live my life by that. So it's a rare one I didn't like. But anyway, yeah, I even forgot what I was. Oh, anyway, I really liked his turn, and I think he has the most. Well, like I said, the two of them both have this journey of like, hey, our kids. Not only do we love our kids, but we can sort of value what were faults in the beginning are now sort of this like individualism we respect.
Yeah, and the classic parent turn of like, oh, maybe our kids do know what's happening a little bit more than we do, and we can respect their opinions.
Absolutely. And that's, that's part of the sort of fantasy of these things, right? It's like, boy, if I just got the shot mom and dad and everyone could see, I am special. I do have skills. But like I said, also, I like that it avoids no one here is a secret Jedi. Like I said, it avoids so many of the pitfalls that aren't necessarily bad things, but they're more just rote Star Wars stuff.
The moment when Wim first tries to use the lightsaber and he turns it on upside down, I found so funny because it's not something we've ever seen in Star Wars before.
Yeah. I mean, the closest thing we've seen to it that was also something I liked was like the Mandalorian being bad at wielding the Darksaber. The idea that like, oh yeah, these aren't like, you can't just pick it up and be rad.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea that like, it's kind of hard to Star Wars,
I really like that moment when they do the speeder jump over the canyon and Wim's dad is just like, woo!
Yeah. Well, sort of also, there's also that aspect too, right? Of this is just like, hey man, like the parents find the kids' sense of adventure in themselves too.
Yeah.
There's that aspect as well, which is firmly part of this.
I guess to kind of like start circling towards the end of this conversation, the one thing that I've seen people criticize quite a bit about this show is the rather abrupt nature of the ending.
I mean, I don't, like I said, I didn't find it abrupt, I guess.
I think it ends like a lot of these sorts of stories do, with a sense of just like, we did it, and whatever problems we had, maybe they'll go away, maybe they won't, but that's not the story we're telling here.
That's what I'm saying. I think the idea that even a lot of the run times of the episodes were shorter, this idea is, like I said, what I'm saying, I wish I had a better word for it. Because I feel like every word I have to describe this sounds demeaning, but it's not like slight or simple. This is purposely a much smaller scale story. And so the ending, I think, fits with that. This isn't going to end in a gigantic climactic battle like a lot of Star Wars stuff does. It's not going to end
Even though it sort of does.
Well, it does, but our characters are removed from it. They're more witness to it, I guess, is sort of the thing, right? It's not going to end with, they're not going to throw down with Jod. That wouldn't fit them as characters. They're going to outwit him in some way.
But I guess people that I've seen discussing it are mostly reacting to the complete lack of epilogue. There is this like, and the show just sort of ends with, and we did it. The end. Credits.
Yeah. No,
it's
a very 80s movie ending. Absolutely.
Very 80s movie ending. Like, I was almost expecting a freeze frame.
I'm kind of sad there's not a song.
Oh, man. How would you even do that in Star Wars, right?
I don't know, but it's just like, I need my Dokken Dream Warriors or something like that. We're the skeleton crew. Something like that. I mean, that would have been fully leaning in, obviously. But I'm saying, like, but I mean, I kind of have a respect for those 80s movies. I mean, look, By the way, the most obvious statement is John Campbell just said he has a respect for 80s filmmaking. But those did just when they were done, man. We're out, baby.
I mean, it's like the end of Ferris Bueller or The Goonies or like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those Spielberg movies. They were just talking about this over on, shout out to the guys on Blank Check. They were just talking about this, that like people, there was sort of this criticism of early 2000s Spielberg not knowing how to end a movie. And to their point, they said, Spielberg used to just kind of not end movies was the thing. Like, think about the ending of Jaws is just they kill the shark and then it's just Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss are swimming back to shore and the movie ends.
Yeah.
You know? How does E.T. end? E.T. flies away and the movie stops. Like, I don't know. I guess that's the
16
thing.
Candles is like literally just the freeze frame of Estevez walking away.
Oh, that's
Breakfast Club.
And it's Judd Nelson. But yeah, we're the Breakfast Club. Yeah, no, these movies were very simple. And so I guess maybe that's the thing is I don't have the reaction because I wasn't looking for an epilogue. I don't need to know anymore. If they make more seasons, but it's sort of just like, I don't know. I mean, what would I mean, you could have done a thing where they're back at school. Yeah. And I mean, you could have done that. I don't know that the show would have been worse for having it, but I also don't think it's worse for not having it.
That's fair.
Be my response. There was no more I needed. I wouldn't have been upset if there was more, but I was totally satisfied.
People expecting like one last shot of Wim and his dad and like them figuring out where Wim goes from here. And it's like, oh, he got a letter. He was accepted to the New Republic High School or whatever.
That I would have not. Yeah. Because now, hey man, check us out in the sequel when we go to college, you know? Skeleton Crew, the college years.
Wim has to make the lacrosse team.
Yeah, oh man. I mean, actually, I kind of do want to see Star Wars College. I want to see a Star Wars frat. That's all I'm saying. What's Star Wars? This was Star Wars Goonies. Give me Star Wars Animal House.
I don't need that. I'm good.
I think we're going to actually get that with whatever Starfleet Academy is going to be to some extent. Or over on Star Trek, we're going to get Star Trek: The College Years.
Yeah.
Which has always been a thing people wanted. I've always been like, I mean, I'm interested, but I can see a million ways that goes badly.
If it doesn't have Boothby, I'm out.
It won't, because it's
I'm out.
He's long dead.
Hologram Boothby. Hologram Boothby.
Boothby's so important, we turned him into a hologram, and he's this AI program now. I would love that, actually. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of this. This is really good stuff, and I think once again, I feel like the lesson I keep stating from all of these, the whole thing stemmed from Watts on the set of No Way Home, just saying to Favreau, "I have an idea for a Star Wars thing," and I'm going, "Yeah, do it." Seriously, but I'm saying like that. Nice. I know, but I want more things like this where. And I think Ahsoka is the case of this, right? Is that's just a character Filoni has such love for and wants to expand upon.
Yeah.
But the idea of just kind of what we were talking about, back to this actually does connect in a weird way, back to what we were talking about with Gunn. Get filmmakers who have pitches. You know? And actually, I think, people can shit on it all they want, but that was the case with The Acolyte. That was totally something that Leslie Headland had this pitch for.
And I think it is also the case for Andor, quite honestly, because obviously Andor the character of Cassian Andor ties into the larger Star Wars saga in some big ways. But the show itself, Andor, is such a contained, separate, it's dealing with the ins and outs of the beginnings of the rebellion, but it is not super connected to the larger saga, quote unquote.
It's very much in line with the other works of Tony Gilroy.
Yeah.
It's as much as Star Wars can be grounded in politics and espionage and that kind of stuff. So I hope they do more stuff like that. Like I said, even if they deemed The Acolyte a failure, which you and I would disagree with, take swings. Maybe some will work, maybe some won't. But I think that's been an interesting thing. I'm very curious to see what this. Supposedly James Mangold is working on this movie about the beginnings of the Jedi that he keeps talking is going to be like the biblical epic of Star Wars. I'm like, that sounds cool. That's an interesting take.
Dawn of the Jedi's got some interesting stuff that they've done, quote unquote, in canon. Obviously, most of that got thrown out when Disney took over, but there was some interesting Dawn of the Jedi stuff being done, and re-exploring that in whatever way they find in a film would be interesting. Obviously, Taika has been threatening to make a Star Wars movie for a while.
Yeah, and Rian Johnson still says, they never have canceled my Star Wars trilogy. It's still a thing that I check in about. So, I mean, there's all these. I still think the biggest missed opportunity, and maybe they'll still make it at some point because I don't think it's officially dead. But the fact that they couldn't get a Rogue Squadron movie off the ground, that's just that was the most oh man, that's a summer blockbuster. Top Gun in space.
You mentioned Blank Check before. Something I hear David Sims pitch every once in a while on episodes there is this just make a pod racing show. Just make it a grease monkey kind of wrenches and vehicles. We got a race this week. How are we gonna pull this one off?
People have pitched Tossie Station, an American Graffiti type thing about teens on Tatooine out racing. That could even be part of that. It's
well, maybe let's stay away from Tatooine for a little while. But yeah.
But I mean, on a planet somewhere, a backwoods planet, and it's about people, just teens who are, whatever. Anyway, that's the thing. Is I like the idea about this milieu in Star Wars, this subgenre in Star Wars or whatever. All right, we got to wrap this up though, because I have to go do another podcast actually. So
busy, John Campbell.
So busy. I do so many podcasts because they're all part of this wonderful network called Punch Up Entertainment. And if you want to support that network, you can go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/punchup. And once again, that's patreon.com/punchupent. Get cool exclusive bonus content as well as help out all the shows. And what's the other place they can check us out, Grigani?
YouTube. Oh, I mean, youtube.com/@punchupentertainment. While you're there, you can watch all of the shows or listen to them. Some of them you can watch, like May the Panel Be With You or Punch Up Plays, have visual components that help you engage more thoroughly with the show by engaging more of your senses while you're at it. And while you're there, please comment, subscribe. All of those things weirdly help us out a lot. That damn algorithm always biting us in the keister. And if you could help engage it, maybe you can keep it away for just one more day.
Yeah.
Wait, no, we need the algorithm close. I guess you engaging it makes it bite us in the keister, which is a good thing in this metaphor? I don't know. Anyway.
It's a vicious cycle is what it is. But that's going to do it for this month's Panel Up. I'm John Campbell.
And as always, I have been Mike Gergoni.
The next month, we're going to panel down.